There's a woman sitting in this room right now, or maybe she's out there in the world, walking down the street, holding it together like nothing's wrong. You wouldn't know it by looking at her. You wouldn't know that inside, she's carrying the weight of the world. And she does it quietly. She does it with grace. But beneath that strength, behind that smile, there's a story. There's a woman you might pass by every day, moving through the motions of life with a quiet strength that commands respect. She appears composed, even joyful, carrying herself with poise, yet there's a quiet storm raging within her. If you look closely enough, you'd see the weight in her eyes, the subtle weariness that never quite disappears. But to most, she's just another face in the crowd, another person going about their life. What they don't know is that she's carrying an invisible load, one that is too heavy to bear on her own. But she does it anyway. She does it in silence, with no one to notice, because she believes that's what strength looks like. She doesn't complain. She doesn't ask for help. She simply endures. This woman could be anyone: a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend. She could be a woman in a marriage, giving all of herself to her partner, but feeling unseen. She could be a mother working 2 jobs, staying late into the night to make sure her children have everything they need, and still waking up early the next morning to do it all over again. She could be the woman who has suffered personal losses, heartache, or disappointment, but keeps pushing forward as though everything is perfectly fine. What most people see is the outer shell: a woman who is getting things done, keeping up with the demands of life, smiling through it all. What they don't see is the weight of her grief, her anxiety, or the countless small wounds she bears in her heart. She carries her pain in silence because for so long that's what she's been taught to do. From a young age, many women are conditioned to believe that their emotions and struggles aren't worth burdening others with. They are taught to be strong, to keep their feelings in check, to handle it and keep going. The world expects her to be the caretaker, the one who comforts others even when she is the one who needs comfort. And so she hides it. She pushes her pain down into the deepest corners of her soul, believing that she must be the one who holds everything together, even if it's breaking her inside. People may admire her strength, but they don't realize how much it costs. The woman who carries her pain in silence often finds herself losing pieces of who she is. In her attempts to be everything for everyone else, she forgets to take care of herself. She pours from an empty cup, thinking that somehow it will refill if she just keeps giving. But that's not how it works. Eventually, the weight of all that unspoken pain begins to take a toll, not just on her body, but on her spirit. She starts to feel disconnected, drained, like a shadow of the person she once was. She becomes disconnected from her own needs, her own desires, her own sense of self. But she keeps going because in her mind, she has no choice. And the thing is, the woman who carries her pain in silence doesn't even realize how much she is suffering. She is so accustomed to bearing the weight alone that she begins to normalize it. It becomes a part of her identity. She doesn't even think to speak up because she believes her pain is something she has to handle by herself. It becomes so deeply embedded in her that she starts to question her worth, thinking that if she asks for help, she's somehow weak or undeserving of support. She starts to wonder if maybe this is just the way life is supposed to be, that the constant weight is something she has to bear in silence. She might also fear judgment. Society tends to reward the image of a woman who can juggle it all: work, family, personal goals, without ever showing signs of struggle. In a world that values independence and self-sufficiency, the woman who carries her pain in silence doesn't want to appear vulnerable or fragile. She doesn't want to admit that she's breaking inside, because that would mean revealing a side of herself that she has spent so long trying to hide. So she pushes the pain deeper, hoping that it will disappear on its own, hoping that if she just keeps going, it will eventually get better. But the truth is, that pain doesn't go away just because it's hidden. It doesn't disappear because it's buried deep inside. The longer she carries it in silence, the heavier it becomes. Eventually, it starts to seep into every part of her life, affecting her relationships, her work, her health, and her happiness. The weight of unspoken pain can manifest itself in countless ways: exhaustion, irritability, a sense of disconnection, even physical ailments. But still, she carries it in silence, because that's what she's been taught to do. That's what she thinks she has to do. This woman's story is one of many. She represents countless women who live with unacknowledged pain, believing they must suffer in silence for the sake of others. But the truth is, carrying pain in silence does not make anyone stronger. It only isolates them, making it harder to heal. And if there's one thing we need to understand about this woman, it's that she is not weak for struggling. She is not weak for feeling overwhelmed. She is human. And the strength she shows by carrying it all may seem admirable, but it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. And sooner or later, something has to give. The woman who carries her pain in silence is often the same woman who sacrifices her own well-being for the sake of others. She doesn't hesitate to give all of herself to those around her, her family, her friends, her colleagues, without ever asking for anything in return. In fact, she's often the first one to jump in and offer help, to take on responsibilities that aren't hers, to be the support others need, even when she herself is struggling. She's the one who will rearrange her life to make sure others are taken care of, but when it comes time for her to ask for help, she stands alone, quietly waiting. Her sacrifices are countless, but they often go unnoticed because they are made with a selflessness that doesn't demand recognition. The reason she sacrifices so much is not because she feels obligated or pressured, but because it's who she is. She has a heart that is full of love and a deep desire to see others succeed and find happiness. She believes in the importance of nurturing those around her, offering guidance, support, and comfort whenever it's needed. She's the one who listens patiently to her friends and family as they unload their burdens, even when she has her own struggles weighing heavily on her heart. She will drop everything to help someone in need, to offer a shoulder to cry on, or to lend a hand to someone in crisis. But what many don't realize is that, as much as she's giving, she is slowly draining herself. And the more she gives, the less she has left for herself. This woman often doesn't have the luxury of being selfish, or at least she doesn't feel like she does. She feels an overwhelming sense of duty to those around her, as if her worth is measured by her ability to care for others. She takes on the role of the caretaker, the problem solver, the peacekeeper. She is the one who maintains the balance in her relationships, who holds the family together, or who ensures that everything runs smoothly at work. She doesn't complain because she genuinely wants to help. She believes that if she can just take on one more task, offer one more piece of advice, or be there for someone in their time of need, everything will be okay. But what she doesn't realize is that in giving all of herself to others, she is neglecting the most important person in her life, herself. Over time, this pattern becomes habitual. The more she gives, the less she keeps for herself. Her own needs, emotional, physical, and mental, are pushed to the back burner. She tells herself that she will take care of herself later, after everyone else is okay. But later never comes. There's always another person who needs her, another task that requires her attention. So she keeps going, putting herself last, thinking that somehow this is what it means to be strong. She tells herself that it's okay because, after all, this is what love is. This is what commitment looks like. She believes that her role in the lives of others is more important than her own well-being, and so she sacrifices over and over again. But as the years go by, the toll begins to show. She might not notice it right away, but little by little, she starts to feel drained, disconnected, and maybe even resentful. The wear and tear of constantly putting others before herself takes a toll on her mental and emotional health. She starts to feel like she's giving without receiving, like she's pouring from an empty cup. And the exhaustion becomes more than just physical. She feels invisible, like her own needs don't matter, like she's only valued for what she can do for others, not for who she is as a person. And here's the painful truth: she might never say a word about it. She won't ask for help. She won't demand the care and support she deserves. She might not even recognize that she's been neglecting herself for so long. She's so used to being the strong one, the dependable one, that asking for something in return feels foreign to her. She tells herself that others need her more than she needs them. She tells herself that it's selfish to take time for herself when there's so much work to be done, when others are counting on her. But in reality, these sacrifices are not sustainable. No one, no matter how strong, can continue giving without ever receiving. No one can pour from an empty cup forever. And yet the woman who carries her pain in silence continues this cycle, giving and giving, hoping that somehow someone will notice her needs, or maybe even see the exhaustion behind her eyes. But by the time that happens, it's often too late. The emotional and physical toll has already done its damage. And while she is strong for offering herself to others, she must also recognize that she is not invincible. Her sacrifices, though noble, are not limitless. The love and care she pours into others cannot be sustained indefinitely if she doesn't also take time to care for herself. She deserves to be seen, not just as the one who gives, but as a person who needs love, support, and compassion in return. She deserves to have someone ask her how she's doing, to check in on her well-being, and to remind her that it's okay to take a break, that it's okay to say no, and that it's okay to prioritize her own health and happiness for once. The woman who carries her pain in silence is often misunderstood when it comes to her strength. Society has ingrained a specific idea of what strength looks like: someone who is unwavering, who never breaks, who carries the world on their shoulders without faltering. For many, this version of strength is synonymous with endurance, with the ability to hide one's struggles, to keep going no matter what. And so this woman becomes a model of that type of strength. She faces the world with a composed exterior, never showing cracks in her armor. But this type of strength, while admirable on the surface, can also be incredibly damaging. What society fails to see is that true strength is not about how much pain someone can carry without complaining, but about the ability to acknowledge one's vulnerabilities, to ask for help, and to seek healing when needed. She believes that the more she endures without revealing her pain, the stronger she becomes. She thinks that by holding everything inside, she is demonstrating a level of resilience that others will admire. It's a belief deeply rooted in the idea that vulnerability equals weakness. The more she hides her pain, the more she thinks she's proving something to the world and to herself. The image of a woman who can silently carry her burdens without showing any sign of struggle is one that society often praises, but it comes with a heavy cost. The truth is, enduring pain in silence doesn't make her stronger. It makes her more isolated, more emotionally burdened, and more prone to breakdowns. By pushing her feelings down and not allowing herself to express them, she disconnects from her true self. She ignores the emotional toll her silence is taking, thinking that as long as she doesn't show weakness, she's doing well. But the reality is that this form of strength is fragile. It's based on an illusion. Every moment she spends hiding her pain is another moment that erodes her emotional health. It doesn't make her stronger, it makes her a prisoner to her own emotions, trapped by the belief that showing pain is somehow unacceptable. This type of strength also makes it difficult for others to connect with her. People might see her as invincible, as someone who has it all together, and may never offer the support or care she needs. She becomes a silent figure, admired for her quiet resilience, but no one truly knows the depth of her suffering. They can't see the cracks because she's done such a good job of hiding them. She becomes a source of inspiration for others, but at the same time, she isolates herself from the very people who could help her heal. And because she never lets anyone in, she never receives the support she desperately needs. The problem is, by suppressing her pain and pushing forward without addressing it, she risks internalizing that pain. It becomes part of her narrative, her identity. The longer she carries it, the harder it becomes to let go. She may even start to believe that this is the way things are supposed to be, that strength means carrying all this weight without ever asking for relief. She may internalize the idea that she is only valuable to others if she remains strong, unyielding, and unbroken. But this belief is a dangerous one because it leads to emotional burnout, to physical exhaustion, and to the eventual breaking point. Her idea of strength may also cause her to neglect self-care, thinking that focusing on her own needs would be selfish. She may avoid seeking help or talking about her pain because she feels that it would be an imposition on others. She tells herself that she is better off dealing with things on her own, because asking for help means admitting weakness. But the truth is, seeking help is one of the most powerful acts of strength a person can show. It takes immense courage to be vulnerable enough to say, "I am struggling, and I need support," yet this is the very thing the woman who carries her pain in silence struggles with, letting down her guard and being open about her vulnerabilities. There is also the issue of emotional repression. When she holds in her pain, she risks internalizing negative emotions like anger, sadness, and fear. Over time, this emotional suppression can lead to depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. The longer she denies her own emotional needs, the more difficult it becomes for her to manage her feelings. She may become emotionally numb or distant, losing touch with what truly matters to her. She might even begin to question her worth, thinking that she must always be strong for others and never show her true self. In reality, true strength is about understanding and accepting one's weaknesses. It is about being kind to yourself when you're struggling and allowing others to offer you the help and comfort you need. Strength comes from knowing when to ask for help and being honest about your emotions, not from hiding them. The woman who carries her pain in silence needs to understand that it's okay to lean on others, to open up, and to let her guard down. She needs to learn that strength isn't about doing it all on your own. It's about recognizing when you need support and having the courage to seek it. But this is a shift in perspective that takes time. For the woman who has spent so long hiding her pain, letting go of this idea of strength can be difficult. It requires her to confront the fear of judgment and to accept that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. It requires her to let go of the belief that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness. True strength lies in embracing vulnerability and learning to ask for help. It lies in the ability to admit that we can't always do it alone and that we all need support from time to time. When she learns this lesson, she will no longer see her pain as something to hide, but as a part of her humanity, something she can heal with the help and understanding of those who love and care for her. The woman who carries her pain in silence often finds herself in a constant battle within, caught between the desire to protect others from her struggles and the overwhelming weight of her own emotional burden. Her inner turmoil can become so consuming that, despite all her efforts to maintain control, she begins to feel the impact of her unresolved pain on her overall well-being. She hides it because she doesn't want to burden anyone else. She tells herself that her pain is hers to carry, that it's something she must endure alone. However, what she doesn't realize is that by choosing to suffer in silence, she is also slowly isolating herself, not just from others, but from her own capacity for healing. She keeps her pain hidden because in her mind, expressing it would make her seem weak, vulnerable, or even less capable. She believes that others depend on her strength, and by showing her pain, she risks disappointing them or letting them down. The fear of being perceived as fragile or emotionally unstable can be overwhelming. So, she bottles up her emotions, convincing herself that she is doing the right thing by keeping her struggles to herself. But over time, this emotional repression begins to take its toll. What she fails to understand is that ignoring her pain doesn't make it go away. Instead, it festers inside, quietly eating away at her mental and physical health. Carrying pain in silence often leads to a sense of emotional numbness. She becomes so used to suppressing her feelings that, after a while, it becomes difficult for her to even recognize what she's truly feeling. The emotions she's been avoiding, grief, sadness, anger, fear, become tangled in her mind, leaving her unsure of how to process them. She might feel like she's lost touch with herself, unable to connect with her own emotions. It becomes harder to experience joy or peace, because the weight of her unacknowledged pain always lurks beneath the surface. The act of hiding her pain forces her into a cycle of emotional disconnection, and she begins to feel disconnected not just from others, but from herself. This emotional numbness can also extend into her relationships. The woman who carries her pain in silence may find herself withdrawing from the people who care about her, not because she doesn't love them or want their support, but because she feels ashamed of her vulnerabilities. She may start to pull away from close friends, family, or partners, thinking that they wouldn't understand what she's going through or that she would be a burden to them. She might put on a brave face, pretending that everything is fine, even when she's barely holding it together. The longer she hides her pain, the more distant she becomes from the people who are supposed to provide comfort and support. This isolation often leads to a deep sense of loneliness. The woman may feel like she is carrying the weight of her struggles entirely on her own, with no one to turn to. She may look at others who seem to have their lives together and wonder why she can't do the same. She might question her own worth, believing that if she were truly strong, she wouldn't need anyone else's help. The silence becomes deafening. The longer she stays in this cycle, the more difficult it becomes for her to reach out for help, because she begins to believe that asking for support is a sign of failure. She convinces herself that she should be able to handle everything on her own, even though she's drowning inside. When a person suppresses their pain for so long, they begin to lose touch with the very thing that could help them heal their own needs. The woman who carries her pain in silence may neglect her own physical and emotional needs because she is so focused on taking care of others. Her health may begin to deteriorate as she ignores the signs of exhaustion, stress, and emotional depletion. The daily pressures of life become overwhelming, but she keeps pushing forward, thinking that if she just keeps moving, everything will eventually get better. But without addressing the root of her pain, she only perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Eventually, her body may start to signal that something is wrong through fatigue, headaches, or even more serious health issues. But even then, she might continue to suppress her own needs, prioritizing the well-being of others above her own. Her silence can also manifest in a lack of self-compassion. When she keeps her pain hidden, she may develop a harsh inner dialogue, telling herself that she should be stronger or that she shouldn't feel the way she does. She may criticize herself for not being able to handle her struggles without breaking down, and this self-criticism only deepens her sense of inadequacy. The woman who suffers in silence often feels that she is failing not only others but also herself. She holds herself to unrealistic standards, expecting herself to always be perfect, to always be strong, and to never show signs of weakness. This inner pressure can lead to feelings of shame and self-doubt, reinforcing the cycle of isolation and emotional suppression. What's even more damaging is that the longer she suppresses her pain, the harder it becomes to express it. She builds walls around her emotions, afraid that if she opens up, it will be too much for others to handle. She fears that her pain will overwhelm those around her, and so she keeps it buried deeper and deeper. But this emotional suppression is not a sustainable way of living. Eventually, the woman who carries her pain in silence will reach a breaking point, where the weight of her unacknowledged feelings will become too much to bear. It may come in the form of a sudden emotional outburst, a physical breakdown, or a deep sense of exhaustion that forces her to confront the reality of what she's been hiding all along. This is why it is so important for the woman who carries her pain in silence to learn the value of vulnerability. She needs to understand that it is okay to show weakness, to ask for help, and to express her emotions. She doesn't have to bear the weight of her struggles alone. She is not a failure for needing others, and she doesn't have to hide her pain to maintain her strength. The woman who carries her pain in silence often carries the misconception that keeping her suffering to herself is a form of strength. She becomes accustomed to hiding the emotional scars, pretending to the world that she is unaffected by the weight of her experiences. However, this constant emotional repression comes with a deep internal cost. By burying her pain, she inadvertently suppresses the very thing that allows her to process her feelings and heal. In doing so, she distorts her perception of herself and what it means to be strong. She tells herself that strength is found in silence, that expressing pain is something to be avoided at all costs. But the truth is, avoiding pain doesn't make it disappear, it only prolongs the suffering. As she continuously locks away her emotions, the woman becomes more isolated from her true self. She disconnects from her needs, her feelings, and her desires. She becomes so caught up in managing the external appearance of strength that she loses touch with the internal parts of herself that require care and attention. This self-imposed emotional isolation often leads to a sense of confusion. She may no longer know how to identify or articulate what she's feeling, and it becomes harder for her to determine what she needs in order to heal. Without this connection to herself, she becomes like a stranger in her own life, unable to navigate the complexities of her emotions, her heart, and her mind. In her silence, she may also begin to invalidate her own feelings. She tells herself that she doesn't have the right to feel hurt, that her pain is something she should be able to overcome without the support of others. She may look around and see others who seem to be managing better than she is, which reinforces the idea that her struggles are less significant or worthy of attention. She convinces herself that if she just keeps moving forward, everything will eventually get better. She may even believe that the more she ignores her pain, the stronger she will become. But the reality is, pain does not vanish by being ignored. It grows, festers, and multiplies until it consumes every corner of the heart and mind. When she silences her pain, she also silences her need for connection. Humans are inherently social beings, and one of the greatest ways to heal is by sharing our struggles with others who can offer empathy and support. Yet the woman who carries her pain in silence believes that she is somehow burdening others if she expresses what she's going through. She tells herself that people have their own problems to deal with, and that her pain would only add to their load. This belief can be so strong that it stops her from reaching out, even to those who care about her the most. She isolates herself in an effort to protect others, but in the process, she withdraws from the very support system that could help her heal. The silence becomes a barrier, not only to her own healing, but also to the deeper connection she could share with the people who love her. This isolation leads to an erosion of self-worth. When she is constantly keeping her pain in check and not allowing others to see her vulnerability, she may start to believe that she isn't worthy of help or understanding. She may feel as though her pain is something that shouldn't be shared, or that it is not significant enough to require attention. She internalizes the idea that asking for support would be a sign of failure, and that strength is about doing everything on her own. But this belief is rooted in a deep misunderstanding of what true strength really is. Strength is not found in the ability to endure pain in silence, rather. It is found in the courage to face one's emotions, to admit when help is needed, and to trust others with the deepest parts of oneself. The woman who refuses to share her pain with others may struggle to accept that strength doesn't come from being invulnerable, it comes from allowing herself to be human. Over time, as the pain accumulates and is pushed further into the background, she may begin to experience feelings of numbness. This is not the type of numbness that comes from a momentary emotional setback, but rather a slow, creeping detachment from the things that once brought her joy. She may find herself no longer feeling the things she once did, whether it's happiness, love, or even the ability to experience sorrow. The constant repression of her emotions dulls her ability to feel deeply, leaving her in a constant state of emotional limbo. This numbness can be a defense mechanism to protect her from the intensity of her pain, but it also keeps her from living fully and authentically. The more she suppresses her emotions, the more difficult it becomes to feel truly connected to others. It's not that she doesn't want connection, it's that she doesn't know how to connect authentically when she's carrying so much emotional weight in silence. She may crave understanding, but the walls she has built around her heart prevent her from letting anyone in. Even when she is surrounded by people who care about her, she may feel lonely because she is not able to share the most vulnerable parts of herself. The silence becomes a prison, not just for her pain, but for her ability to connect and share love with others. The emotional burden of carrying pain in silence also has physical consequences. When emotions are repressed, they do not simply disappear, they manifest in other ways. The body holds on to unprocessed emotions, often leading to physical symptoms like headaches, muscle tension, fatigue, or even more severe health problems like heart disease or digestive issues. The woman may begin to feel run down and exhausted, but still refuses to acknowledge that her body is telling her something important. Her unwillingness to confront her pain emotionally may cause her to overlook the toll it is taking on her physical health. She keeps pushing forward, convinced that if she just keeps moving, she can outrun the effects of her emotional suffering. But the longer she refuses to address her pain, the more it wears her down, both emotionally and physically. At some point, this constant repression of pain will reach a breaking point. The silence will no longer be sustainable, and the emotions she has been suppressing will begin to demand attention. This may happen in the form of an emotional breakdown, a moment of vulnerability where everything spills out. It could also happen in small, seemingly insignificant moments where the weight of her unresolved pain becomes too heavy to ignore any longer. When this happens, she will be forced to confront the pain she's been holding inside for so long. This is often the turning point, the moment when she realizes that healing requires more than just endurance. It requires honesty, openness, and vulnerability. The walls that she has so carefully constructed around her heart will need to come down if she is ever going to heal. And for that to happen, she must first accept that there is no shame in feeling pain, and that asking for help is not a weakness, but a sign of the true strength she has always carried within. The woman who carries her pain in silence often builds a facade that everything is fine, masking the deep emotional struggles that are quietly gnawing at her. She becomes a master of appearances, presenting a picture of strength and composure to the world, even when she feels completely undone on the inside. The emotional burden she carries is not visible to those around her, because she has learned to hide it so well. She tells herself that if she can keep it together on the outside, no one will notice the inner chaos she's facing. She hides behind a smile, behind routine, behind the distractions of everyday life, refusing to allow others to see the depth of her pain. This mask is a coping mechanism, a way to protect herself from being judged, misunderstood, or seen as weak. She doesn't want to burden anyone with her troubles, believing that her struggles are hers alone to handle. The thought of opening up and revealing her true feelings feels like a vulnerability she cannot afford. She's afraid of being perceived as weak, and so she chooses to suffer in silence, thinking that she can manage it all on her own. In her mind, expressing her pain would make her appear fragile and incapable. She believes that if she shares her emotions, people will view her as someone who cannot handle life's challenges, someone who is less resilient than others. This fear of judgment, this fear of being seen as weak, locks her into a cycle of silence that is difficult to break. Over time, she begins to internalize these beliefs. She begins to see herself through the lens of the mask she wears, believing that her worth is defined by her ability to appear strong, composed, and unaffected by the turmoil inside her. This creates a dangerous disconnect between her true self and the image she projects to the world. The woman who carries her pain in silence becomes increasingly removed from her own emotions, unsure of who she really is beyond the mask. She may find it difficult to even acknowledge her own pain, because doing so would mean admitting that she's not okay, something she fears more than anything else. This emotional repression comes with significant consequences. As she hides her pain, it doesn't go away, it festers in the background, slowly eroding her mental and physical health. The stress of constantly holding everything inside can lead to feelings of burnout and exhaustion. She becomes so used to living in a constant state of emotional turmoil that she no longer knows what it feels like to experience peace. The pain she refuses to express becomes all-consuming, a heavy weight that she carries with her everywhere she goes. It's not just her emotional well-being that suffers, her physical health may also begin to decline. Stress, anxiety, and unresolved grief can manifest in physical symptoms such as headaches, insomnia, or even more serious health issues. But she pushes through, telling herself that as long as she can maintain the appearance of strength, she will be okay. The problem with hiding pain for so long is that it prevents healing. Emotions that are not expressed or processed do not simply disappear. They build up inside, creating a kind of emotional backlog that becomes harder and harder to manage. The woman who keeps her pain to herself may experience periods of emotional numbness, where she feels detached from her own feelings. She may find it difficult to connect with her emotions, unsure of what she's truly feeling or how to process it. She may be overwhelmed by a sense of sadness or frustration, but not know where it's coming from. The longer she remains silent, the more disconnected she becomes from her own emotional landscape, and the harder it becomes to address the pain she's been suppressing. This disconnection from her emotions can also create challenges in her relationships. She may find it difficult to open up to others, not because she doesn't trust them, but because she has built walls around her heart. The thought of letting someone in, of revealing her pain, is terrifying. She fears that if she opens up, others will reject her or see her as a burden. As a result, she may withdraw from those closest to her, feeling isolated even when she is surrounded by people who care about her. She keeps her emotions bottled up, even when she longs for connection. The silence becomes a barrier to intimacy, preventing her from forming deeper, more authentic relationships. The need for vulnerability is an essential part of the human experience. It is through vulnerability that we can find healing, connection, and growth. Yet the woman who carries her pain in silence may not recognize the power of vulnerability. She may see it as something to be avoided at all costs, not understanding that in allowing herself to be vulnerable, she gives others the opportunity to offer support and compassion. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of courage and strength. It requires the strength to be honest with oneself and others, to face the pain rather than run from it, and to trust that sharing one's heart can lead to healing.